So what I would like to do a deep dive on, if it's okay, is amino acids for restorative sleep and for better life. And in particular, I'd like to talk about the folate cycle because I think it reveals a good deal about which amino acids are more important and, importantly, which are just cycled through. And when you take them as supplements, you may induce an imbalance rather than a balance in metabolism. So let me show you what I would like for us to discuss. Yes, this is the folate methionine cycle. Can you see it?
Not really.
Oh,
I
not
can
really.
large.
Oh,
Yeah, okay. So that's yeah.
so we can talk about MTHFR, what it really means and how confused people are about it. We can talk about methionine and homocysteine balance. We can talk about S-adenosine methionine and why it's an intermediary that should not be taken as a supplement because it imbalances the methylation methionine homocysteine cycle. We can talk about how important choline is, both for increasing absorption of magnesium, but choline gets converted into betaine, and betaine can feed into the methylation cycle in a physiologic way, which we encourage, and not in an imbalanced way, which we discourage. So if it's okay, if you can see this, I would like to talk about the folate and methionine cycle in regard to amino acids and which we recommend and which we don't. And then if it's okay, we can talk about our mood guard and sleep guard as adjunctive to other health promoting restorative sleep and methylation improvements.
Okay. Um, I think you you would actually do a better job than I at doing the fine points here. What I know is what works in terms of the different amino acids for different desired endpoints. Like GABA for calming, serotonin for um, feeling better as opposed to agitated and obsessive and unable to sleep.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Do you recommend serotonin and melatonin? Because I recommend tryptophan that physiologically gets converted where and when it's needed to serotonin and melatonin. I do advocate that, but I'm very concerned about end products that become feedback inhibitors, the way serotonin and melatonin do, suppressing the body's endogenous production.
Yeah, very good point. And I like tryptophan over 5-HTP because we can control it. It's actually you're not forcing it into the brain as you do with 5-HTP.
Exactly right. And 5-HTP is more likely to go to excitoneurotoxins like kynurenic acid and things like that, not so for tryptophan.
Yeah, so it's tamer. It's easier, it's more physiological.
More physiological, not pharmacologic.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? What we're doing is we're avoiding the pharmacology. We're avoiding the pharmacy because we have the best pharmacy inside us, but we're using things that may not be the best in terms of supplements. So even there, you need to be very aware of pathways and individuality, individual biochemistry, and act accordingly. So there's a lot to know.
There's a lot to be unraveled, revealed, clarified, because working with physiology is different than working with pharmacology. And I find it, and I think you do too, much better to start with physiology and to see what else is needed.
Correct. And it's such a better system. It's really a travesty the way people are given medications
Mm.
for mental issues. Like they really do the opposite. Get
The
people
opposite.
addicted, and that's the whole, that's the point, isn't it? Get them addicted. So they have to keep coming to the psychiatrist. So there's money there, and then there's money from the pharmaceutical industry, and people aren't getting better.
No, because young doctors are taught that they can always add but they can never taper. And I am convinced that you can taper safely, effectively, slowly, personally, and get off of unnecessary pharmaceuticals and switch over to nature,
Totally.
nurture, and wholeness.
Right. You support the natural production of neurotransmitters, and that takes over because the problem is a low level of specific neurotransmitters. And by the way, that may not be the root cause, but it's a cause. So let's say someone is low in serotonin and it has to do with their gut. It's not their brain. It's not that their mother was mean to them, whatever. It has to do with a gut imbalance. But we don't have to go there right away because we need to treat right away. So we give tryptophan, it'll raise serotonin, and that will help someone to sleep, help them to feel calm during the day. And then you address some of the other issues that are underlying, like the gut issue, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which affects the sympathetic nervous system. So somebody's on constant fight or flight. So it's all really connected. So when you say it's from a psychological cause, yeah, because there's a physiological intermediary of the fight or flight response.
Well, only in modern medicine do we separate the mind from the body. The mind and body are always connected. There are two nervous systems, as you know, the central nervous system and the gut nervous system. The microbiome includes digestion, but yes, what we eat, drink, think, and do are profoundly influencing every aspect of us. Now, with regard to traumas, because we all have early traumas, I suggest you cultivate a relaxation response. Use a green light. Do abdominal deep breathing and relax, relax. And therefore be able to go back and witness, not re-experience the trauma,
Yes.
but witness and release yourself from any hostility or adversity by just being present. I don't live in the past because you get depressed. I don't live in the future because you get anxious. I have an interesting challenge to live in this interesting, exciting, rewarding moment, like talking with you today.
Yes. And it's easier said than done. Some people have a lot of trouble sitting and, for example, meditating, contemplating. So you help that along with the amino acids. You give some GABA or theanine, which enhances the amino acid, enhances neurotransmitter GABA. GABA is both a neurotransmitter and an exogenous, which means you give it, it's from the outside. You can give GABA or take GABA. And theanine is GABAergic. It helps to make GABA. And for some
Now, I
people,
like to take my theanine through herbal teas that we brew at 170 to 180 degrees, but matcha and silver needle and rose petal and herbal teas can be a very good source of theanine.
right. And then if you're drinking that tea, it just by physiologically begins to calm you down. And so you're in a better position to contemplate, meditate, be present, be in the moment. So you can, as you say, process the old traumas and not be affected, not having to
Right. Not be
suffer
afflicted,
through them
not
again.
right.
And there were a lot of schools of thought when I was in, in residency and then the encounter movement, lots of, you got to suffer, you got to experience it. You have to um, talk about how much you hate your mother and your father and beat them up. And I mean, I always thought it was kind of crazy myself. I said,
Well,
don't
if you
get what
actually
you
look
don't
at
want.
the if you actually look at the clinicians who brought forward that idea,
Mhm.
they were not psychologically healthy themselves. And you're absolutely right. Re-experiencing reinforces the harm and trauma, the PTSD, etc. There are physicians who are special forces, and PTSD is very common, along with digestive disorders, along with sleep disorders in our special forces. My colleague Patty Doyster spent 20 years studying whether special forces could go out on mission and succeed, or were too stressed out, too sleep deprived, too imbalanced in mood and digestion, and they just had to sit it out. But I will just make a moment's comment. Relaxation response, meditation, mindfulness are techniques. Some people do much better listening to certain kinds of classical music. Some people do better when they move slowly around, a kind of walking meditation. They prefer that. I want what you like to do to be what you do, because if you like it, it's 5 to 10 times more helpful than if you just do it because of obligation or for whatever other reasons. So yes, I think some of the common myths, like you have to get in and fight with the trauma, or you have to put up with lack of restorative sleep and lack of good digestion to deliver the amino acids, not polypeptides, which turn out to be excluded from the body, and have a healthy digestion, have a healthy microbiome, have a conversation using the vagus nerve between the gut nervous system and the central nervous system.
The vagus nerve, we must cultivate and honor the vagus nerve, which is carrying the messages from the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut.
We now know that that's true, but when I was a young physician, the vagus only went from the central nervous system to the body because we didn't realize that it was in constant communion, not just communication. There's a dynamic, continuous relationship through the vagus highway, through the vagus physiology, and we're beginning to respect nature, nurture, and wholeness more and more.
Right. And that's the whole point of alternative or functional medicine, where we really look at the physiology of what's going on rather than putting a Band-Aid on in the form of medication. And I keep bringing up medication because it's kind of front and center in my professional life, and that people have been on medication for quite a while. It hasn't helped. They can't get off. Their doctor won't take them off. And if they do, they take them off abruptly, and then it's a disaster. And in all kinds of ways, lots of symptoms, and it can actually be dangerous. So I look at medication as a really serious trap that may actually have a little promise at the beginning with a little bit of side effects, but then the side effects will often get worse. And the effectiveness, if there was any, diminishes. And then more meds are added, doses are raised, meds can be changed. And I've seen, this is a travesty. People are addicted to a substance, let's say an opiate. I actually had one patient a couple of years ago that was addicted to a prescribed opiate, went into a rehab center and came out on 5 different medications, all of them worse than the opiate she'd been on. And it was really hard to taper her off. When you're on that many medications, it's really a challenge. That poor woman really suffered, and she never should have gone into rehab for the opiates. Had she been given
We had Mikhail Kogan recently on, and he pointed out that 130,000 people each year die early with much suffering because of what you might call iatrogenesis, misunderstanding that we can only treat symptoms with prescriptions and ever more prescriptions. So it's not a small issue. It doesn't affect just a few people. This is a national catastrophe that we can manage much better. But I would like, if you can, to enlighten us about your understanding about amino acids and how important amino acids are, not just as building blocks for protein, but getting converted into molecules of health.
Absolutely. And I give people a chart that explains what each one does. For example, there's the uppers and the downers in the amino acids. The uppers are stimulants for focus and concentration and energy, tyrosine and phenylalanine. They're called catecholamines. So tyrosine
So
and
that
phenylalanine,
produces adrenaline,
it produces it and it gets you going.
gets you
It,
going. And a
so,
little bit is good to get going,
right,
and more is not necessary. The concept of balance, of physiology before pharmacology, needs to be massively introduced into our medical practices, because the notion, as you correctly say, is often to move to more prescriptions, which then alter the brain and body, making it more difficult and challenging to taper, but it's still possible to taper, especially if you have a support system with helpful amino acids.
right. And it's essential. So
Essential.
before we taper, we replete that person with we replete the missing neurotransmitter using the precursor, which means the amino acid that turns into that neurotransmitter. So if you do tyrosine and phenylalanine, you're going to form dopamine. And that's where I was saying about a stimulant, focus, feeling good, having energy, alertness, drive, and feels good. Then we get the more calming ones like serotonin and GABA. And as we mentioned, that serotonin is made from tryptophan and 5-HTP, which are on the same pathway, but it's actually more physiological to use tryptophan because it gets carried over the blood-brain barrier with a little bit of carbohydrate. So there's something conditional about how it's absorbed, which is a good thing. So your brain can actually control, your body can control how much is crossing over, whereas 5-HTP kind of barges in. It doesn't have that restriction of needing carb to get it across the blood-brain barrier. And when you have enough serotonin, you have a feeling of flow and flexibility, peace, and able to sleep, which is so desired by so many people who can't sleep. And when you don't have enough of it, you're anxious, you can't sleep, you're obsessive and irritable, you have trouble, as I said, trouble sleeping, sugar cravings, overeating, especially at night. So, not a good thing. And then people turn to certain illegal substances just to feel better, or they're prescribed something. But those are the people who may turn to alcohol to feel calmer. But that is a double-edged sword. It does not work as a good solution, or sugar. And then another, what we've mentioned already, is GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter. And it has some supporting amino acids as well, like theanine, glycine, and taurine, and even inositol, which isn't an amino acid, it's a sugar. And these are a natural tranquilizer. We have the availability of natural tranquilizers, and we have this wonderful pharmacy inside us that converts it to the desired neurotransmitter. We don't have to try to fool the brain with drugs.
No, with regard to restorative sleep, we have a book, Thriving in the 21st Century. You may have seen it. There's about a half an hour that we suggest to transition from the doing of the day to the being of the night. And that your bedroom should be cool, dark, and free of
EMF.
machines, screens, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You don't need that when you're sleeping, and it may just delicately but informally jangle your sleep.
Yeah,
So I think the bedroom is mostly for sleeping. It is not for checking your email.
correct. Yeah, it should be an EMF-free zone.
MF-free zone. I like that. It's part of your personal blue zone to be physiologically supportive of life and your biology. And then see how well you can do using food as medicine, medicine as food, including amino acid as supplements within a physiology, within a understanding of which amino acids go which direction. Crosslinks in collagen and elastin depend upon lysine. So each of the amino acids is a building block in its own right, but very often they have very important physiologic functions that you understand. You can explain to people how to make better use of these amino acids and help them decide whether they want more dopamine and adrenaline, whether they want more serotonin and melatonin. But I will just mention that when you take the downstream products, the serotonin or the melatonin, you suppress the body's endogenous production of those important intermediaries. But when you give tryptophan, it converts to serotonin and melatonin when needed, where needed, and it increases the body's ability to make these natural compounds.
Right. It's very elegant. When we think of the miracle of the body, how things are done, it's amazing. And it's much more subtle than a prescription. And it works so much better.
Amen. So now if we could for a moment turn to the folate methionine cycle and just unpack and clarify about that. So we're going to bring that up on the screen. So dietary folate, or B9 as it used to be called, is very important in the methylation cycle. But it must be balanced, and you can measure methionine and homocysteine, and your methionine should be up and your homocysteine should be down. Then if you look at the upper left, you see MTHFR, which is a variant. There are many thousands of variants of MTHFR, but the notion that MTHFR is a marker, something that determines what you should do, is just profoundly wrong. As Eric Lander, who advised President Biden on DNA, RNA, and omics, he points out that variance is common, but it doesn't mean harm. It means that you're a unique human being, and therefore you should live in harmony with your nature. I will also mention that choline and inositol need to balance at the cell membrane. Choline needs to become acetylcholine in the brain. Choline also increases the fluidity of your bile. So cholinergic bile salts are also very helpful. And if you want to measure, you measure the choline inositol ratio to know where you are. Most people need more choline, and they get enough inositol. Now, there are other amino acids that also play important roles in physiology. Yeah, so we're going to take this slide down, and any specific amino acids that come to mind that you make use of in your practice.
Besides the ones that I just mentioned?
Yeah, besides, I'm talking about L-aspartate. Methionine turns out to be a mood elevator as well as a methylation enhancer. Glycine, a simple amino acid, turns out to be a soothing neurotransmitter, kind of like dopamine. So physiology is really quite marvelous.
Well, glycine tends to be calming. And for example, I give a lot of magnesium and in the form of magglycinate because it's great for muscle cramps, for agitation, anxiety, hypomania, mania. Magnesium's so I'm moving a little into minerals because they're also really
They're intimately related.
and
But
they're
methionine is important. Magnesium is critical. But magnesium, you can triple the uptake of magnesium when you combine it with choline citrate. The ion channel, the calcium magnesium ion channel, saturates at 1/3 of the dose. So if you give a higher dose of magnesium, you will get loose stool and people will generally run away from you with diarrhea. we have pioneered and documented that choline citrate, the only choline that alkalinizes is choline citrate. So whatever magnesium you prefer, fine. Some ionized with a decent counterion, but magnesium. And should always, in our opinion, be taken with choline citrate to triple the uptake of the magnesium and triple the benefit from activating ATP, from magnesium-dependent enzymes, from the proton gradient that allows your battery to produce ATP. But along with the ATP, we get a proton. And if that proton, that acid, builds up, you get metabolic acidosis, which is a cause of much chronic illness. So we want to triple the uptake of magnesium, and we want it to go thousands of different places where magnesium is helpful along with amino acids.
Amen. And I took my choline citrate this morning. Thank you.
Great. Great. Now we suggest with each dose of magnesium, but yes, there are many cholines, there are many types of choline, but choline citrate was found by consumer labs to be the best, the safest, the least expensive, and the most effective.
Okay.
Congratulations on taking your choline citrate.
Thank you. Thank you for making it.
We've had the privilege, you know my background, we've had the privilege of pioneering a number of aspects of physiology that turn out to be quite remarkable because nature revealed is a great teacher. And when you look from a pharmaceutical or a drug point of view and try to make natural products into drugs, most of those studies have failed. There was a very famous study that involved beta carotene as a vitamin A source and a synthetic vitamin E. And it's very specifically was looking at whether it improved function of the lungs and reduced lung cancer. It failed. It failed because it used synthetic beta carotene, not carotenoids. It used synthetic vitamin E, not mixed natural 8 forms of tocopherols and tocotrienols. Before that study was done, the Shute brothers, and you're too young, but maybe you've heard of the Shute brothers in Canada, they took thousands of people, gave them mixed natural tocopherols and carotenoids and a little of nature's vitamin C and a little bit of polyphenolics that were bioavailable. And they literally reduced by half the heart failure, the heart attack, the vascular coagulopathies, the extra blood clotting in the vessels of the body. Today, you barely hear about these heroes from the 1950s and 60s who really deserve to be appreciated and their work updated. We always need improved studies. But when people say today, well, we need more studies, we don't know enough to make a beneficial impact on the quality of life, I profoundly agree with you that we can, when we're willing to respect nature enough to use nature's tools in a balanced way, not too little, not too much, just like Goldilocks said, just right is just right.
Well, I'm also thinking of Abram Hoffer and Linus Pauling with vitamin C and niacin. Hoffer did some beautiful research at a very large psychiatric hospital in Canada using niacin and vitamin C on backward schizophrenics and had them out of, these were chronic, they were lifers. Got them out, he got them working, collecting Social Security or the equivalent in Canada, and having families, being part of a community. That was amazing. Now
Abram Hoffer was a giant. He was a genius. He was a mentor to both of us. And most importantly, his wife was very chemically sensitive. He moved from Saskatchewan to Vancouver Island because the environment was better for his wife. And you may know this little anecdote. he intuited, he understood that oxidized adrenaline, called adrenochrome, but oxidized adrenaline might produce psychiatric symptoms. So he had his biochemist synthesize this form, adrenochrome. He injected it into himself. And for 3 days, he had to remind himself, you're not a paranoid schizophrenic, you're a fool for taking adrenochrome. He told that story a few times.
Speaking of tripping, he also experimented with LSD, not maybe so much on himself, but he was well aware of something that went underground for a long time and now is back as a therapeutic method, which is
So LSD was used in IBM, including Bobby Kennedy and other names you would know, politicians you might know of. And what they found is problem-solving creativity went way up. But the collateral effect was that many people refused to continue to work for companies like IBM, HP, etc.
Yeah.
And so not just Abram, but Carl Pfeiffer and Linus and Humphrey Osmond. There were a number of leaders who were just shut down because psychotropics are hard to control. And so they were for a long time under a shadow, but now they're coming back. Ketamine has now been shown to be very helpful in many kinds of depression. So it's the time to look widely, to go outside our boundaries, to rethink what is helpful, at what amounts, in what combinations, and what is unhelpful. So now is the time for us to rethink a lot of our assumptions. The assumption was that LSD is bad. All the category 1 substances in the pharmaceutical arena are perceived as risky. Actually, the approved pharmaceuticals might be more risky when you compare them head to head, but more importantly, we have made many assumptions, mostly started by Bobby DuPont under President Nixon, that we had to advance pharmaceuticals and we had to ignore nutritionals or nutraceuticals.
Of course, like someone has well documented a very eventful psilocybin journey with one, maybe two, and they're through with their quote mental illness. They're okay. Their trauma, their anxiety, whatever it is gone, and they're feeling good about themselves, and they're functioning, and they're not having to take Prozac every single day. So that's a big loss to the pharmaceutical industry. So it's all about the money.
It is very much about follow the money.
Dropping out, if people, if you remember the hippie era, people were in fact dropping out because they were seeing in perspective, see what their lives are, see what these big companies are, see how did they really want to live? They were connecting with nature, with their nature, with other people, with with everything, inanimate objects. And once you've seen all that, you can't unsee it. So it was shut down.
It was shut down, and it needs to be remembered. It needs to be resurrected. We had political decisions being made about which approach, pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals, nature or synthetics. And yes, the money suggested one way, the need suggested another. Our calculation at the Health Studies Collegium is that we bury early at high cost and suffering 1 million people a year in 3 categories because of lack of understanding of nature, nurture, and wholeness. We could divert $1 trillion a year that's being spent now to bury people to promoting their well-being, and speeding the transition from sick care, symptomatic care, to healthful caring, looking at the upstream causes, looking at predictive biomarkers, looking at the individuality of the person to guide their individual care. Not a protocol, not a fixed dose, one size fits all. Actually, that's a myth, an illusion, a mistake. So I'm so glad that we're getting to reveal some of these simple physiologic facts and truths so that people can find integrative, functional, comprehensive, holistic practitioners and maybe form a team that will support their well-being. And included in that is tapering off these pharmaceuticals while increasing nature's nutritionals.
And all the other lifestyle things to support it. So it's not simply taking, substituting one pill for another pill, but although that's a very important substrate, but to have the lifestyle, being close to nature, exercising, and all the things we've been talking about.
Stretching. Again, in our book, Thriving in the 21st Century, we walk you through first why you should make the transition and then how to easily, effortlessly, and methodically make the transition. It doesn't have to be done in 20 minutes. It may take some time and commitment and persistence because perseverance furthers success.
Amen.
Anything else you would like to leave us with from your experience, from your wisdom, from your being such a wonderful physician?
Oh, thank you. Well, I will reiterate that we have the best pharmacy inside us. We can trust it. We need guidance from professionals. There's a lot of things people can read, can watch. There's videos. There's a lot of ways people can learn all of this. But we need to honor our individuality, our biochemical individuality, personalize our healthcare, and then we're onto something. That's the way. That's the way of the future, unless it gets shut down again. But I'm very hopeful with
Emanuel Churaskin, Ringsdorf, taught me what you are articulating so well and helpfully now. Daily values determine the minimum you need to survive. Optimum daily intake is quite different. So using physiology first, using nature, nurture, and wholeness in vitamins, minerals, but the natural forms, not the synthetic forms. It's a huge opportunity to save lives and treasure. So we're excited about what you're doing. Tell us a bit about the summit that you're going to be leading and participating in on restorative sleep in just a few weeks, I think. So let's put in a plug for that.
Yes, I actually sent an announcement, which I don't have in front of me, but it's April 29th. I actually have to look it up. Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, it's April 29th to May 2nd.
Yeah, feeding the recovering brain and about people in recovery. Now, addiction does not have to be treated the way it's treated now. I mean, it's just a travesty like the rest of mental health. So this is how to use food and supplements to turn people around in a very physiological way. It's a wonderful conference. You don't have to be a therapist. It's great for therapists and physicians, any kind of health practitioner, but even the educated public. And it's in Columbus, Ohio, but it's also virtual. So you can and it's less expensive to go that way. So you can see it virtually. You can go to Columbus. I'll be there and I'll actually be speaking about sleep. The theme isn't sleep, but I'll be speaking about the importance of sleep in recovery. And a lot of the things you and I just spoke about here. It's going to be a wonderful conference, feeding the recovering brain.
Thanks for doing what you're doing. Keep doing it long and well. And hopefully the message will get out.
Okay, thank you. And my website's cassmd.com, CASSMD.com.
CassMD.com, CassMD.com. Easy to get to. You should.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. It's always wonderful talking to you.
Mutually.
Thank you.